high school music. Um, had a music teacher who my mother never forgave for getting me into music. And I played, he walked in the room, he said, "You play drums." I played drums. And very nice man. And would start taking the kids who were interested to orchestra rehearsals and things like that. And he played in the Montreal Symphony Orchestra at the time. And then I started my first band in Montreal with friends of mine who are still friends of mine. We were 15 years old, called Filet of Soul. Nice. And we started playing around Montreal, and we're still all pals and everything like that. And of the four of us, we all stayed in music for pretty long, and I continued. And then I was always the guy in the band who liked the technology, and just went from there. So went from there, went to music school, then got a bachelor's degree, and then got a master's degree. Came out and got into the music technology thing when I went for my master's degree, and haven't looked back. That's how I got my start. Actually, I guess after my master's, I came to Toronto, and I started my first studio, which is still running, called Inception Sound. And we went from a single room with a rented 24-track to two 24-track studios. And it's still up and running. I left there. I was the chief engineer at a place called McClear Pathé, then became McClear Digital. And then I left there and went freelance, and maybe, I don't know, 8-10 years ago. And I haven't stopped since. The seminal ones for me would have been the ones that caused the biggest changes for me. And that's so the second record I ever made was with a woman named Jane Siberry, and I made half the record. Then the record got sold to a record label, and that was the first success that I had. And that sort of bred every other success. That's really what it was about. It was about finding the people at the same level that I was who were committed. I had a place that I could do the work inexpensively, because the kind of clients I had didn't have money either, right? And where money wasn't the real object. And then and I went from there. So Jane's record was a big one. Then I met up with a client of mine, still a client of mine, a woman named Lorena McKenna. And the first full record I did with her was the first Juno Award that I won. That was a big one. And that bred a bunch of other stuff. And then I guess the next really big milestone after that would have been the Blues Brothers movie that was shot in Toronto. I started doing music for movies early in the game. I had friends who were composers, and it was a big market. And in this market, Canada, in Toronto, it was hard to be so completely specialized. I know I wanted to stay in music, which is what I did. But in order to wind the bass, I had 2 studios to care for, and with staff and all kinds of stuff. We broadened the base and bought the equipment necessary to sync with picture, and started doing music for movies and television. And I did a lot of TV series and stuff like that, a lot of movies. And the Blues Brothers came along. That was at McClear. That was a big one. That was lots of fun. Maybe the big moment on that was recutting Respect with Aretha Franklin. That was a big one. And then after that would have been some of the travel. I've been around. I've been to Moscow a few times. I've been to Europe. I spent 10 days at the Alhambra in Spain. That was a big project. It was a beautiful project. I've been to Greece, Italy, France, England, Brazil, and China. Besides to the States, a bunch of them. So the travels are those are memorable events. Like I said, it's sometimes for the work, sometimes just for where you are.
Right.
Waking up in Beijing, going, "Hello."
Yeah.
That was nice. That was interesting. Cool.
And it's amazing that it's because of what you do.
Yeah. I think that a lot of that has something to do with being current, and I wasn't. I don't have a huge remorse for the change in technology, and for me, it's not about It's not so much about what it is; it's about what you do with it. So I think that kept me current, and which means that I became, for lack of a better word, a bit of an expert. And as the projects tend to get more expensive, especially when there's picture involved and stuff like that, people value more and more the idea that you can handle a lot of different things happening at the same time. And the complexity goes up and the experience becomes an asset. The thing is that I do a lot of mixing, and I do a lot of mixing, computer-based mixing, and I have a controller that I use, but no console anymore. And I have to say that the fantastic part about the computer mixing is the recall, because I do a lot of mixing at a distance. There's often nobody else around but me, so I have to post the mixes and then we talk about it. It's totally great to be able to go back and tweak what we've done, but you have to be able to get there from here. You have to be able to get back to where you started. But I have a lot of outboard gear, and I became more and more intrigued after the pendulum swung all the way to doing everything in the box, with going back a little bit and getting to use the pieces of equipment which were so particular and good and cool that it was that I missed using them and that sort of stuff. And plus, I missed a bit of the glue. Let me give you an example. I have a good friend of mine, a great engineer, who says, and I think he's right, that if you take two channels on an analog console of any two things and you mix them together, and you take the same two channels on a digital console, it's easier to mix them on the analog console than it is on the digital console. And I always equate that to the phenomena of dither, but not digital dither. You know the kind of dither that they use in graphics, right? On the screen, they tend to fuzz the edges a little bit so that the typeface doesn't look so harsh against the white background. And that's the same thing that analog does, by and large. That little bit of distortion, because it is distortion, helps to feather the edges a bit, and helps things glue together. So I get it that there is a difference between analog summing and digital summing and so on and so on. And I wanted the opportunity to do both. And so I looked for a piece of equipment that would, one, sound good but introduce some of the dither, so to speak. If its claim to fame was that it sounded the same as a piece of digital equipment, that was no good to me. And so for that, I looked for something that incorporated some sort of tube technology, because by default, that will generate a certain amount of harmonics and stuff like that. It's the nature of the beast. So I looked for a little tube console, first of all, or tube equipment. I also wanted a way to access more than two channels, so that I could route out of my digital audio workstation. I could route, let's say, channel 1, and in channel 1 I'd have a particular compressor hooked up or something. And I also wanted a sweepable EQ, so that I could do wide EQ changes, either to compensate or to color. And one other thing I wanted the ability to drive the piece of equipment hard, so that I could in fact generate distortion or extra harmonics or whatever you want to call it. So I needed all those things. And when I looked around, plus it would be cool to have something that summed, so that if I had 2 or 3 sources, or I wanted to try analog summing, I could try it. You put all those together, a small console makes the most sense. I also, one other thing is I need mic pre's, because I have 2 locations. Here I use the mic pre's a great deal. This is the recording environment. Even at the mixing environment, I still have a very nice little room that I do a lot of recording in, and it's extraordinarily convenient to have several mic pre's around of good quality, so that I can do overdubs and stuff like that. So again, the console made the most sense between the summing and the number of channels you could get in a small chassis, and the tube technology. You look around and there's a few builders, and I tried the TL and it sounded great, fit the bill.